Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today, yet another in this endless line of tags that I have racked up as backlog that I need to get to. And this one is fairly simple, and it calls to me in a direct way, as you'll see. It was created by Rick MacDonnell, and it is the 10 years, 10 books tag, where you go back 10 years to 2010 and march your way forward year by year, giving your favorite book for each year. And the reason that it calls to me is because I have done this myself long before I was on BookTube. I had done this for many, many years. I had a book blog named Steve Reads. And at the end of every year on Steve Reads, I gave an annotated list of the best and worst books of that year. And that list is still going on. It's been going on every year for a long, long time. I even did a thing called the Donoghue Interregnum, where I extended that list backwards in time to cover the years when I was not online. So there's a vast, vast backlog of annotated years best and worst lists for me. So a thing like this is of immediate interest. Now, Rick didn't tag me because he hates me, because I smell. And I have a suspicion that some of the people who really like his channel hate me for completely different reasons. But one way or another, I couldn't resist this tag in its elegant simplicity. So we're going to go all the way back to the year 2010, and we're gonna start with 2010. And I can't do my favorite book of the year. At the very least, I have to do my favorite nonfiction and my favorite fiction. And even then, it's not really possible. Really, what I'm doing here is looking back at those lists and seeing which two books jump out at me the most. Maybe not my absolute favorite, but the ones that have, in that weird way that books do, the ones that have germinated the most interestingly over time. Some of them are absolutely favorites. Some of them are just great. But I'm going to give you one nonfiction and one fiction for each year. And starting with 2010, the fiction is Wits by Joshua Cohen. A really good, memorable novel, not only about Jewish identity, but about the nature of fads and the nature of endangered communities and how we commodify culture. Just plus a range of really funny characters. I loved it, absolutely loved it. Never seen a copy since the one that I read that year. Never seen it in a used bookstore. Never. Never seen a paperback of it. I've never encountered Wits in any way other than that first time 10 years ago. And the nonfiction work for that year is Dermot McCullough's Christianity, the First 3,000 Years. Also a big book, and just unbelievable in terms of scholarship and also eloquence. Just an amazing work to have. If you are a Christian, if you are interested in Christianity, as everyone should be, since it remade the world in its image, and even if neither one of those things are true and you're just interested in beautifully written scholarship, this is a book to have. I have seen copies of this one. I wish that I had a hardcover of it. I still have my original battered old trade paperback. But then we move on to the year 2011. And for fiction, the book that jumped out at me was The Art of Fielding. Chad Harbach's debut, for which he got just a pile of money. People just pushed a pile of money across the table at him. It is on one level a sports novel. I mentioned it the other day in that context as a sports novel. A group of characters navigating around a college sports team, but it's about much more than that. One of the most affecting things in the whole book is a portrait of a father and daughter's relationship that is unconventional and really, really moving. The proper motor of the plot, one element of the plot, there's a sort of a wonderkin pitcher for a team who can do amazing things on the mound. And at one point at the beginning of the novel, he winds up to deliver the heat across home plate, and the pitch goes wild. He loses control of it, and it goes into the dugout at 115 miles an hour. And many different plot elements unfold from that horrifying moment. But there's so much more going on in the book. So that's going to be my fiction choice. And then for nonfiction, it's biography. It's Walter Isaacson did a biography of Steve Jobs. And I heard about it in catalogs, and I got an advance copy, and I thought, okay, well, I'll get around to this, but it doesn't really interest me at all. I don't know anything about Silicon Valley, and even I know that Steve Jobs was an a-hole, and that he built a career on basically uh, using other people's ideas, not rather than being a Tesla type innovator on his own. And then I started to hear from friends of mine who were reading advanced copies and working on reviews for various outlets, because this thing got reviewed everywhere. And they were all saying, "Yeah, I felt the same way. Why write a biography of Steve Jobs? But this is incredible. This is just incredible, just as a biography." And I read it and felt the exact same way. It got reviewed everywhere. I wish I'd been a part of that conversation. I really do. But I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So it counts, definitely. Then 2012, for fiction, I'm going to go with In Sunlight and Shadow by Mark Helprin. This is another book I've never seen other than the copy that I got originally. I got an advanced copy and I got a finished copy originally. This is a kind of a sequel in a way to his book Winter's Tale, but it very much stands on its own, and it is beautiful and big-hearted, just rolling in stories and grandeur. Grappling with it was so much fun. Grappling with it in a review was so much fun. And I remember vividly walking along the shore at Cape Cod, just slowly on a beautiful day, talking with another book critic about what we were going to do about this book, what we make of it. And also, I've talked to the author and had a chance to talk with him about this book, and that has also been wonderful. But you don't need to do any of those extra things. In Sunlight and Shadow is terrific on its own. It's not probably quite as good as Winter's Tale, but what book is? So that's the fiction for the year. And for 2012, the nonfiction is a bit of a strange thing you wouldn't maybe expect it. It's On Politics by Alan Ryan. His extremely erudite, historically informed musings on the history of politics as a practice and on its nature, done in 2 thick volumes in a box. That's just amazing. I got a copy and thought, I'm going to be bored stiff by the beginning of this first volume, and instead I was enthralled the whole time. And again, I have never seen On Politics by Alan Ryan after that. I've never seen it on sale, as a remainder, or I've never seen it in a used bookstore. Never. And the reason I mention this is because it must mean something. I'm not exactly sure what, but it must mean something, because the used bookstore that I'd be talking about is the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, which is not open at the moment, but when it was out buying books all the time. They had a turnover like nobody's business. So I expect, whether it's naive or not, I expect to see everything at the Brattle, and I've never seen On Politics there. Then we move on to 2013, and for 2013, the fiction is The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert, a historical novel about a character named Alma, who becomes a scientist, becomes an investigator of the natural world, and there's so much going on in that book. It is just a profusion of lovely prose and plot lines exfoliating out of plot lines and musings on the natural world. I just don't quite know even now how to categorize it. It's just such an amazingly generous novel. And it is not an example of something that I've never seen. It's been reprinted many, many times. Had its paperback edition is many places. And for nonfiction, a little bit of an unusual choice. This is Mary and Lou and Rhoda and Ted by Jennifer Armstrong, which is her book about the Mary Tyler Moore Show, an old 1970s sitcom on TV that I loved. I never missed it. I was always impressed, even at the time, by not just how funny it is. It can be very, very funny, but also how good it is, how well written it was. And this is a story of the creation of that show and all the bigger than life characters that were involved in it, and all the writing and all the setbacks and all the little triumphs. And books like that, I expect them to be so treacly and so shallow, and this wasn't. I wish, when I was finished with this book, not only was I sure that it was going to be one of the best nonfiction works I read that year, but I really wished that we had a book like this for every TV show, successful or not. You know that every one of those sets was host to these kinds of heartbreaks and triumphs, these kinds of wonderful stories. Written in such a generous way, it's got to be possible. Maybe Jennifer Armstrong just needs to make a living out of doing this sort of thing. But anyway, in the meantime, Mary and Lou and Rhoda and Ted, those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, those are 4 characters on the show. was terrific. If you see it and you're thinking, okay, and maybe you're a little leery, you're thinking, this is just going to be a People magazine type thing, shallow as a baking pan. No, it's not that. It's really, really good. So well worth your time. Then for 2014, the fiction I would pick would be The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. He's a bit of an acquired taste. I know that not everybody likes him, but I thought that The Bone Clocks was great. But a pair of kids who get caught up in the gigantic machinations of two hidden societies, vaguely supernatural hidden societies that exist in the world and that are going to chew them up and spit them out. It's just, and I mean, that, like with everything else, like with all other David Mitchell books, that's just one tiny strand of all the rest that's going on in the Bone Clocks. I thought it was terrific, just terrific. And for nonfiction, another bit of an odd choice. It's called Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant? It's a cartoon book by the great Roz Chast, the great New Yorker cartoonist Roz Chast. And it's about her parents. It's about her parents being impossible and being themselves and getting older and getting frailer and getting weaker and needing more and more care. And I started it thinking, okay, well, I have been watching you poke gentle fun at your weird parents and weird older people in your cartoons for 20 years. So I know what to expect. I did not expect this book to go into the deep territory that does, much less to do so in such a heartfelt way, in such an incredibly true way. I'm still in amazement about that book, even after all this time. So it counts as my nonfiction choice. Then for the year 2015, the fiction I would pick would be Epitaph by Mary Doria Russell, who came on a lot of people's radars for writing science fiction novels, but then wrote a historical fiction novel called Doc, about Doc Holliday, that I read and I liked it quite a bit. It seemed to me to be a very noticeable departure in terms of prose choices. It seemed to me to be a different kind of prose and on a different level of skill, much like I felt about the long series of Royal Gardner books that Hilary Mantel wrote, and then all of a sudden there was a gap, and then she wrote Wolf Hall, and I thought, okay, obviously the same author, but a very different pitch here, much better pitch here. Same thing with this, where I thought that the Doc was a departure, but I didn't know that, I was reading it, I didn't know there was enough to carry the book. And then Epitaph came along, and Epitaph is the story of the gunfight at OK Corral. Obviously, if one book introduces Doc Holliday, you know the next book is going to be the gunfight at OK Corral. And I had read a couple of other very good novels on the gunfight at OK Corral, which you wouldn't think would be true because it lasted 15 minutes. But it produces great fiction, and Epitaph is amazing. Just amazing. Still my favorite thing by this author. And for nonfiction, on that year, the nonfiction for that year is one of the only nonfiction examples on this list that achieved huge popular notoriety, so that it's not going to need much of an introduction. And that is John Ronson's book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, which is about extreme online living and the costs and the benefits thereof. And for 2015, good Lord, was it prescient, because we're living in that world now, in a way that in 2015 seemed only tentative. It seemed like only one possibility. Now we're living in that world. We've elected presidents in that world. So, and I love the book anyway. I loved it without its prescience, but going back to it, oh my. Then the year 2016, for fiction, it's a book that I got on this channel. I praised it on this channel, but I can't expect all of you to go. 2016 is when I started this channel, so that we have a little bit more of a record to go on there. And I praised this thing then, but I can't expect all of you to go back in time to all of my previous videos. And it is by Stephen O'Connor, and it's called Thomas Jefferson Dreams of Sally Hemings. And it is a very unconventional historical novel about Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Just very unconventional and very beautifully done. And for nonfiction, I would pick Ingratitude by Jenny Diskey, who was a freelancer and a freelance writer who got a death sentence. She was told, you have cancer and you're not going to survive it. There's nothing you can do. And when you tell a writer that, of course you're wrong. There's one extra thing that they can do. Christopher Hitchens did it, and that is to write about that last voyage. And Jenny Diskey did, and Ingratitude is wonderful. It's her on every page. It's hard but tender. It's eloquent but blunt. It's everything that she was conveyed in a book. So what a monument! What a thing to do! What a final act of defiance! Then for 2017, and again, we're talking now. We're firmly in the realm of BookTube, of Steve on BookTube, in addition to Steve out in the critical world. So these books might be familiar to you. For fiction, I have John Boyne's book, The Heart's Invisible Furies, which I thought was just amazing. Just in every, it was a bit of a BookTube darling as a book, and that might have made me a little bit leery. But no, the book just overwhelms such thoughts, just overwhelms them. John Boyne, of course, he was a BookTube darling with The Heart's Invisible Furies, and that raises problems of its own. That is a danger, because that BookTube darlings can sour. They can be turned on. They're not going to be next season's darlings. And his next book, Ladder to the Sky, has been ripped apart by everybody on BookTube who's read it. I don't agree with that at all. I think a lot of that ripping apart was based on I hate to say it, but simply flawed reading. Just a lot of the objections to that book that I've heard, not just on BookTube, but among fellow critics, a lot of the objections that I've heard have been the type where instead of saying, well, yeah, I don't like that kind of thing and you do, or you like that kind of thing and I don't, so I would understand you'd have a different reaction. Instead, a lot of the objections that I heard to that book were the other kind of reaction in me, which was, well, no, I can textually prove that what you're saying is not true. So if what you're saying is the reason why you're reacting poorly, then you need to change your reactions, because I can prove to you, I can go to the page and point out that the points you're making are not true. And it's only been in the last few years that I've realized that doesn't actually make any difference, whether you can do that or not. It's the visceral reaction, even if you're skipping some things or missing something that I think is important, is still the crucial arbiter here. It's still going to mean the book is unsuccessful for you. But anyway, I don't think anybody feels that way about Heart's Invisible Furies. It's just a blockbuster of a thing, just amazing. And for nonfiction for 2017, I want to the thing that popped out off the list that I had was Ed Finn's book, What Algorithms Want. All about the algorithms that rule our lives. And subtly implied in the title is that maybe this is a life form. It's not a point that Ed Finn ever really explicitly makes, but you can't avoid thinking it by the end of the book, that maybe you're talking about a life form. It was creepy and incredibly enlightening. I loved it. Then we move on to 2018. And for fiction, I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here and choose a debut novel. Ordinarily, I wouldn't do that. But this debut novel has stuck out in my memory more than almost all of the non-debut novels on my best fiction list for the year 2018, and that is Ohio by Stephen Markley. This book doesn't need much in the way of seconding praise from me, because it's been praised with hosannas all over the literary world and everywhere else. Every library book club, every reader on Twitter, every rando Calrissian anywhere on social media that encounters this book and says, yeah, I found it in a waiting room, or I found it in a free library and I started it, and oh my God, is this good? That is the reaction that everyone has to this book, and I totally agree. I totally agree. It is the kind of debut novel that stories are made out of on its own. I don't know what this author will go on to do, but good Lord, I could not mention any novel other than Ohio. And for nonfiction, I want to pick The Library Book by Susan Orlean, which is not just about one particular fire at one particular library, but more broadly about what libraries are to all of us, why it matters that so much more when a library burns than when, for instance, a Chamber of Commerce burns. What libraries mean to us and why they mean that. Just terrific. Just a terrific book from start to finish. I loved it. I loved writing about it. Then we come all the way down to 2019, just last year. And for fiction, I'm going to pick Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. I know that it is a controversial book. I know that a lot of people have plowed their way through it. It's very long, and thought, why did I do that? I don't see what's going on here. What is this? A lot of people that I know are permanently stuck in that book. I have one friend in the suburbs of Connecticut who periodically sends me pictures of of his copy of Duck's Neighborhood Report with the bookmark on his nightstand. And there are all sorts of books that pile up around it, and they change and they move, and sometimes a kid's hand is in the picture, sometimes a dog is looking at it, but that never changes. The Duck's Neighborhood Report just sits there. I believe those pictures are meant to be a kind of indictment, because I told him it was well worth his time, but I stand by that. It is. There's a lot going on in that book. I love it when things like this. It reminded me a lot of Wits, the first fiction that I mentioned. I love it when things like this come along. Weird, world unto themselves works like this. I love it when they come along. I always have. And for nonfiction for 2019, I'm going to pick Shoshana Zuboff's book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which is huge, and it is extremely intelligent and extremely insightful, and it's all about the fact that every piece of technology that we use is also using us. And that, I mean, the author doesn't harp on this too much, but that the sooner we realize that, the better. The sooner we realize it and do something about it, act accordingly, the better for everybody, including society, the better for societies. The key to realize is that if the age-old saying, the saying that has been around forever, I'm sure you've heard it, that if you're online and you see something that's free, you're the product. You are often being traded. Your information is more valuable than your money, and is being traded every day, all the time. Right now, your information is on. I'm sharing information with this Star Trek device. I'm sharing information with my phone and with YouTube and with interested third parties. This video alone is generating a treasure trove of information, and all of us are. And that is not necessarily nefarious. It's not necessarily uncontrollable, but we should be paying attention to it. And that's what this book essentially boils down to, although, boy, oh boy, there's so much else in it. It's so thought-provoking. And that brings us to 2020. And although it's bitterly cold, it's freezing cold and dark as midnight with tons of rain and sleet in the forecast all the time. Nevertheless, we are only in April. we are slowly approaching the first day of May, which means there are a lot more months in the year to go. And unlike a lot of people, I read almost exclusively new releases, and I read very fast, 150 pages an hour on average, and I read a great deal. It's not just that I read 150 pages an hour, it's that I read for 10 hours a day, sometimes more than that, every day. So I'm covering a lot. I'm consuming a lot of new releases, and it's my favorite thing to do. It's not just my job. It's my favorite thing to do. And I keep tabs on all of it, running throughout the year, lists throughout the year, in mental preparation for making my Steve Reads list at the end of every year. That Steve Reads list is still, it's free. You can read it anywhere you want, and it's rinky-dink because I have no technical ability, but that list is consulted by lots of people. It is in its own little humble way an institution. And I pay a lot of attention to it. I put a lot of work into it. Around June, I will start to finalize preliminary lists, but every month, every week, I am constantly accumulating lists of potential list members, of things I'm definitely ruling out, things that I'm holding off on because they gave me that weird impression that there might be more to them than I thought. They need to be revisited in a few months or half a year. So we're still early for me to be calling any kind of favorites for 2020. But I am going to try it, just in the spirit of this tag. For fiction, I'm going to pick a debut collection of stories that are loosely interconnected. Some of them are loosely interconnected, and I read the book a month ago, and I haven't really been able to get it out of my mind, and that's always a sign for me that maybe this is going to be fiction that's going to last for me, that I'm not going to, that when for instance, if I ever get a finished copy of it, I'm not going to be able to poke holes in it. And it is by Matthew Baker. It's his debut, and it's called Why Visit America? And the title refers to the fact that in one of the stories, a small town in Texas decides to secede from the Union and call itself America, and accept tourism from the other America, from the America that surrounds it on all sides. And that is in itself, that's a cute gimmick, but it's just a gimmick. But there's a lot more in the stories than just gimmicks. They have stuck with me. I will revisit the whole thing in the early fall. I'm hoping that in the early fall things will be back to a semblance of normal. I will be getting books in the mail again. Finished copies will be back on schedule for publication. Authors will be able to go back out with masks and gloves and make a living with their readings and their signings and whatnot. I don't know of anything that's going to happen, but I like it. I would like the idea of it. So that's going to be fiction, a debut collection of stories. Why Visit America? And for nonfiction so far, it's Victoria de Gracia's book, The Perfect Fascist, about a henchman of Mussolini's during the fascist buildup in Italy, fell in love with an opera singer, and de Gracia uses their combined stories as a keyhole to tell the broader story of the rise of and conquest of fascism in Italy. And I've only read the advanced copy. I will read it again when I get a finished copy. If I get a finished copy, I'll certainly read it again in a few months, whether I get a finished copy or not. And I was deeply impressed by the job that is done here. So I find it hard to believe that this book won't register on the list at the end of the year. And that is 2020. Those two are very provisional, but nevertheless, when I mention lists at the end of the year, looking at this list, making this list, and thinking about it, I naturally went looking for a lot of those old year's best and worst lists on Steve Reads, and it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. I had my blog, Steve Reads, on, I think, Blogspot before Open Letters Monthly existed, the literary journal that I mentioned. And then Open Letters Monthly came into existence, and we wanted to have a little family of blogs on the site in addition to the main reviews. So I moved Steve Reads over to Open Letters, to the Open Letters site, and just started doing Steve Reads on Open Letters. And then that lasted for 10 years. And the whole time we were on Bluehost, and the whole time there were plugins that needed updating, there were widgets that needed changing or swapping out, so that by the time 10 years was over, Open Letters Monthly was lit up like a Christmas tree. It was just 1,000 crosshatches and individual solutions, and it was built and operating on widgets and plugins, some of which hadn't been made or updated in years. So it was a coding nightmare. And then that version of Open Letters shuttered and changed into Open Letters Review, which is on Squarespace. And eventually we had a huge amount of that old material just bulk ported over to either st.donoghue.com, my own website, or to Open Letters. And all the coding was broken, all the pictures, the links were broken, all that sort of stuff, all the fonts were regularized. So it takes a huge amount of work to go through there and go through all of those old entries, find them, and clean them up so that they can be read. But in addition to that, over the last 3 or 4 years as I've been doing that, I've noticed that there are quite a few things that don't seem to have made the jump over. I've been told that mass porting like that can happen, where you'll just lose stuff. Stuff will just slip through the cracks. So for this tag, I was looking around, like for instance, 2011, the year 2011, I couldn't find any hint of my Steve Reads list for best and worst of that year. I couldn't find any hint of it. Gone but not forgotten. Only since it's the internet, it's more accurate to say forgotten but not gone. I know that those things are out there somewhere. It would take a conscious effort to delete them, and no conscious effort was made. So they have to be somewhere. And all the rest of these, they're all scattered to the winds. They look, the Open Letters Review ones from 2018, 2017 on, all look nice and clean, because Bluehost updates its own site. They don't make you go hunting for your widgets and your spanners and your whatnot. And it's a smaller operation, so it's easier to keep it clean. But the previous years, oh my God, they're a mess, an absolute mess. It reminded me, when I was doing this tag, it reminded me that what Open Letters Review really needs is an archivist. A internet savvy young person to just talk to me, come in, and then make it your job to just go through all of that mess and clean it up. Just a little bit every day. Just clean that mess up. And of course I can't pay you, but if there were such a person, I could certainly give you credit for your work. Your name would be right there prominently on Open Letters Review as our archivist. If that's the sort of thing that you want to build a career doing, it's a big task, and I would give you prominent credit. It's not, it's the masthead for Open Letters Review features myself and Sam Sachs, and between us, every month we reach 500,000 people, more than that, with our writings. Our masthead features Britta, who's an internationally respected author of both fiction and nonfiction. Our masthead features Zach Raberoff, who, true story, was the arbiter of succession for the House of Duras. So we're not. In other words, what I'm trying to say is we're not a bad crew to have your name attached to. So I guess I'll end this 10 books tag by putting out the call. If you're interested in trying that to be the Open Letters archivist, I have a real need for you. It was only a tag like this that brought it out to me that I do have a real need. I'm doing this stuff, but I have other writing jobs. So I can't do a lot of it every day. If you'd like that credit and to fall in with a good group of people, feel free to sing out in the comments field or to email me. My email will be on this video, as it is with every video. So anyway, it's another long tag. Good Lord. But this one was going to make... you're lucky that I didn't do 10 books for every year, because I could easily do that. This is what I do. I keep track of new releases as they come out per publication year, which this tag, in all fairness, it doesn't require that you do that. This tag is what books did you encounter in these years, not what books came out in these years. But with me, it was going to be that way. So all it's left to do is for me to tag people. And I am fully back, after a little bit of hesitation, I am fully back in tagging mode. So I want to tag a bunch of people. I want to tag Alan Moreton. Let's see, Jayne Catherine on books. I don't think I've tagged you in a while. CodeX Cantina, the guys at CodeX Cantina. I don't know if you do tags. I get the impression that Luna is an extreme planner. So maybe you don't do content on the fly. If that's the case, maybe you don't do tags, but I thought I'd tag you anyway. Mark at Richardson Reads. I know for a fact he keeps a book. He keeps a list of books. So, and writes them down so he could consult that maybe for years. Mike at Pints and Paperbacks. Even though 10 years ago I think he was probably 4 years old. he might be able to do it. Joseph Francis Burton, if you're interested in doing this tag. Shawn D. Standfast. We'll certainly have bookish memories going back to 2010. I think it's certain. A channel called Rajathon, a channel that I found through Codex Cantina. I'm finding a lot of channels through Codex Cantina. I couldn't be happier about that. It's a whole substrata of BookTube for me to penetrate and subsume. But I don't think I've ever tagged Rajathon. I want to. Let's see here. Olive at a Book Olive. Going back to 2010, going book by book, year by year. Maybe you have some sort of spreadsheet. She has spreadsheets for everything. Sue at Sue's Book Nook. Feel free. Take a trip down memory lane. Peg at the History Shelf. Let's see here. Oh, also, I know it's forlorn. It'll never happen. But I'm still going to tag Jennifer at Insert Literary Pun here. I haven't tagged her in a long time. She just made a video, so I know she's still alive. Maybe she'd like to do a tag. Tags don't hurt any kind of standing in the publishing world. Maybe you could do that. I'd love to hear what books you liked, what books stick out from 2010 all the way on. So that is the 10-year, 10-book tag. Oh yes, of course. I also tag Britta, the aforementioned Britta Mola. So that is the 10-year, 10-book tag. Of course, if I didn't tag you, I still want to know your answers to this, because it's going to, like with everybody, every video I watched, Just One Reader did this, you're going to be watching these videos and saying, I meant to read that, or, I love that, or, I can't believe that was your favorite book of the year. I didn't like it at all. This is that kind of tag, and I love that. Absolutely love it. So if I didn't tag you and you want to do this, feel free to do so. So I'm going to wrap up another monster tag. So in addition to being an endless stream, a tagapalooza of backlist of tags to do, they're all going to be 40 minutes long. I don't know about that. Well, I'll try to do tomorrow's tag. I will try to do in 10 quick minutes, like at boot camp. Yeah, that'll happen. So I'll wrap this up, but I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.